Good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. Learn a little bit more about some of our public and private offerings to support your growth, your export growth, and experiencing new markets, and also growing your business and hopefully creating more jobs here in Maryland and around the country. Again, my name is Antoine Griffin. I have the pleasure of being the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Commerce for International Trade. That's a lot of words, particularly for so early in the morning. And what that means is I have the distinct pleasure of working with folks like the people behind me, including Bill Burwell, who just introduced me. He runs our Baltimore, Maryland U.S. Export Assistance Center. And what's that? That's a place where exporters and small and medium-sized firms around the country can visit to get one of four things. Trade counseling on how to grow and optimize your business, useful market intelligence on the best places, the best foreign markets for your particular good or service, business-to-business matchmaking. One of the things we do is help U.S. firms and businesses identify a foreign buyer or distributor for the good or service, and also help in finding trade promotion programs or commercial diplomacy. And by that, I mean helping you find the appropriate trade mission. Sometimes we help U.S. businesses identify trade events, either both here in the United States or abroad. Now, how do we do that? What does it look like? More often than not, it involves one-to-one engagement between our U.S. trade, international trade specialists on the ground in one of our offices. But increasingly, it involves the work through which, through these partners like the ones represented here, about folks like Tony and Montgomery Community Media. What we realized since the president launched the National Export Initiative back in 2010 is that if we were going to diversify and grow our economy into the next millennia, then it was going to take both a public and private effort. Frankly, what we're invested in doing right now, the Department of Commerce and in the Obama administration, is trying to change the DNA of U.S. businesses so that every entrepreneur, every U.S. business start moving forward does so with global expansion in mind. What we know that is 95% of the world's consumers live outside of our borders. And therefore, if you're starting or running a business with just a domestic marketplace in mind, then you're leaving a lot of money and growth potential on the table. And what we know is that we can't wait for the next economic calamity in order to optimize our businesses and seek out these global markets. So we're trying to do it in a proactive way, and we've seen great results. Just here in Maryland alone, we've seen last year about $12 billion in goods exported to foreign markets. That doesn't even include the fast-growing service sector industries, legal, accounting, technology, traveling and tourism, which also counts as a service export. So we know that we've got a lot of room to grow, and it's through forums like this and engaging businesses like yourselves to grow and seek out global markets that we expect the future to be even more bright. So again, it's through active work with our federal, state, and local resources, working with our partners like the District Export Council. Our friend Carl Lifsay is here. What they do is we set the table, and more than anything, try and set up forums like this for networking, information sharing, and hopefully that'll lead more and more businesses to feel comfortable and ultimately act. And want you to know that there are a ton of resources here, both at the federal, state, and local level, to support your network. You're not in it alone. Lastly, I want to make a plug for one of our big initiatives, priority initiatives for 2014. It's called the Discover Global Market Series. And for many of you who live here in the Mid-Atlantic or in the state of Maryland, you've worked with our Maryland U.S. Export Assistance Center to participate in Discover events in the past. Atlantic City, New Jersey a couple of years ago, and in Raleigh, Durham in the Research Triangle last year. And what we do at those events is bring back our commercial officers from overseas and international staff to do one-on-one meetings, pre-scheduled one-on-one meetings with businesses like yourself to tell you about emerging opportunities in foreign markets. And again, what we're trying to do is bring all of that knowledge, expertise, commercial intelligence to bear right back here in Maryland, so you don't have to necessarily buy an international plane ticket to make that business decision. We try and bring the show back here to make it an easier decision for you. And again, whether it's trade counseling, market intelligence, or identifying a foreign buyer or distributor for you, we want to make it as easy as possible because we know that what you're invested in doing is spending your time running your business. So with that said, I know that I've got to get out of the way so you can hear from the panel and hopefully be, trigger some thoughts in your mind and hopefully encourage more of you to act. So thank you for your time and attendance. I hope that you learned something new. today. And if me or any of our folks in the U.S. Export Assistance Centers or at the Department of Commerce can ever be of assistance, we are no more than an email or phone call away. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you for those opening remarks, Deputy Secretary Griffin. It's a pleasure having you here. Welcome and hello. My name is Kelly Leonard, and we're going to kick off our panels with one on international business development. With that, we'll highlight sales, marketing, and finding partners beyond U.S. borders. In this panel, we'll talk about how companies break into new markets overseas, specifically how they do business, how they identify opportunities, promote themselves, and make sure that they're doing business with the right people. I do have two seasoned business professionals with me who will share their personal accounts, what to do, what not to do when they seek to enter new international markets. But with that, I want to kick off introductions. Our first panelist joining us is Nancy Wallace. Nancy is the Vice President of Computer Frontiers. Nancy has more than 20 years of hands-on experience working in over 35 countries and has developed in-depth knowledge of business practices in regions worldwide, extensive experience of market development activities, and expertise in project design and management. Her range of experiences has included work on economic impact, market analysis, training, site selection, permits, licensing and certification, as well as immigration procedures. So thank you for joining us, Nancy. Next to Nancy is Mike Schneider. Mike is the Global Business Executive Director with extensive experience in international management consulting and business development, especially in European and Asian countries. Mike founded Far East Business Ventures, an international management consulting and trade development practice focused on the Pacific Rim countries. To his left is Jessica Reynolds. Jessica is an international trade and investment specialist. She's currently serving as the regional manager responsible for India and Africa for the Office of International Investment and Trade at the Maryland Department of Business and Economic Development, or DBED. Her responsibilities include marketing the state of Maryland to an international audience, attracting foreign aid, foreign direct investment to the state of Maryland, and assisting Maryland-based companies to export. And then you've already met Bill Burwell to her left, but Bill serves as the director of the U.S. Export Assistance Center in Baltimore. In that capacity, Bill is responsible for the management and operations of the organization. The USAEAC assists Maryland's firms to increase international sales and expand business operations by utilizing the U.S. Department of Commerce, U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service Network, as well as partners such as the Small Business Administration and Ex-Im Bank. So welcome, panelists. So I'm going to kick off this panel by asking a couple of questions specific to our partners who have a presence in foreign countries, by asking Nancy first, what social and economic changes are taking place that impact the way people are doing business in Africa?
Well, thank you very much for being here, and it's I was honored to be invited to be a part of the panel today and to speak on Africa. And I just need to clarify, Africa is not a country; it is a continent. Right. And so, any of the numbers any of the information I give is actually, we talk about Africa in general and the social and economic impacts of doing business in Africa. You can't just say Africa, although I will use some general numbers. There's tremendous diversity in Africa, as people know, and I am a big supporter and always willing to help Bill and DBED promote trade with Africa. Computer Frontiers has been working on the continent for 18 years. We've had a tremendous success, and we've gone from east to west to south to central. And one of the things, the social impacts or the social factors, there's still tremendous issues with healthcare. There's still tremendous issues with education. They're improving, but it's still a major impact on doing business in Africa. The key is to find what countries are advancing and how they're advancing. If you're looking at, we're an IT company, and so when we first went into Africa, we went in as a USAID contractor. As a USAID contractor, we're going in doing development work, was bringing in the internet, training people on using the internet, introducing them to computers in general, and that was in the 90s. Today, the economic impact, there's a growing larger middle class. The growth rate of the continent in general is, last year was just under, or 2012 it was just under 5%. Last year was just over 5%. In 2014, they expect it to be a 6% growth rate. That's just tremendous, that's outrageous, which is wonderful. And it's wonderful for businesses to pursue the markets, but either regionally or individual countries. Some of the other things that we see in the economic changes, besides the economic growth rate, you also have the GDP across the continent was $740 in 2000. It's about $1,701. So that's, again, a tremendous growth in 10 years, and we're seeing it grow even faster. So a lot of the trends we're seeing, the education, even though formal education is still low, there's access to internet. And as we all know, that changed our lives. You can learn anything on the internet. You're programmers, you have people who are programming work. So the social impacts are still significant. There's still, corruption's still a very big issue, but it's becoming less. And then the economic people are actually earning more money. There's more money being brought into it. And I do see that there's been a shift from commodities. People always talk about Africa and the commodity market. We're starting to see more of the technologies, which is something we focus on.
So Nancy, just to follow on with that question, so you mentioned just having visibility to those countries in Africa that are advancing. Are there specific countries that perhaps you say are more advanced than others that provide greater opportunity for the group?
Oh, certainly. Well, South Africa is always a leader. South Africa definitely has laws that are easier to work in. But East and West Africa also, I mean, you have your anchors. Everybody, you talk about even vacation, where would people go? If you say Kenya, they say great. If you say Tanzania, you say great. If you say Uganda, a lot of times people are a little hesitant, but Uganda is just growing tremendously. There's been a lot of stability there, governmental stability. There's their laws it's fairly easy to do business there. Actually, Uganda was the first country we started our the U.S.-Ugandan partnership. So we opened an office there in 2000 with a local partner, and that office still exists today. And that office, not only do we migrate away from USAID contracts and government contracts, we are now working completely on the economy, setting up websites, doing local IT services, and also doing government work, but we have no government work in Uganda anymore. And it's still our largest office. And then in West Africa, I would say Ghana. Ghana is a fantastic country to do business in. It's, again, very stable. The economy is growing at a little bit slower rate than other ones. We also have a big presence in Liberia because of the investment into Liberia, because of the stability over the past couple of years. Oil companies are going in. We do IT services for oil companies. And we like the cutting edge. I know a lot of companies don't. We like computer frontiers, it's in our name. You know, we like to be at the edge and bring technology to some of the regions that most people don't go to.
Gotcha, awesome. Similar question for you, Mike, but focusing on China. So what are the key social or economic changes that are taking place that impact the way people are doing business in China?
If I can just take a couple of minutes and say a little bit more about my company to kind of clarify what it is, I'd be happy to talk about with everybody. Thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure for me to participate on this panel. Far East Business Ventures is actually a consulting company that I established in 1992. The purpose of that business was to help companies interested in doing business in China and other parts of Asia. The company that I'm representing today that's really important, I think, for this particular forum is called TechnoLink China. And that's a business that actually was emerged from a British marketing and services company that originally set up an expeditionary office back in Hong Kong in 1979. That's how far back that goes. The company was called Inchcape, and they were largely in the marketing and services business. I ended up joining the firm and working with them from about 1992 till 97. And during that time, I was basically attached to the unit called Inchcape China Technologies, and I was helping them find companies in the United States and Europe interested in going to China and doing business, or selling products to China. 1997 came, there was a reorganization within Inchcape, which I welcomed because it gave an opportunity for myself and my partner, Philip Chan, to take the Inchcape China Technologies unit, business unit, private, rename it Technolink China, and carry on with the same work but in a private firm. So that's Technolink China in summary. What we do is we're a service provider, and that means specifically for us, it's sales representation services that we provide to both US and European equipment and technology product manufacturers. So think something different than you typically think. Instead of outbound from China to the United States or Europe, it's going to China from either Europe or the United States. So it's products that we, our staff, actually sell in China for purposes that the Chinese have, obviously. We're very narrowly focused. I'll point that out immediately here. I thought I'd also throw in a little bit about China's, some basic facts that kind of sort of frames what China's like. There are 1.4 billion people in China. It's the most populous nation on the earth. Of those 1.4, there are 800 million peasants, fundamentally living off the farms in very remote parts, many cases, throughout China. China accounts for, in terms of land mass, 6.5% of the land mass of the earth. Their civilization goes back 5,000 years. And it's important to remember that when you come to think about things like customs and culture. Very, very important to understand that, and of course to respect it as you go about trying to do business in China. The most densely parts of China in terms of population are large cities, mostly along the coastal region. That would be Tianjin, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, up and down the coast itself, the East Coast. There are no fewer than 56 different ethnic nationalities in China. One of those nationalities is the Han group. They represent about 90% of the people living in China, and they're all over China. They're spread all over the place. China is bordered by no fewer than 12 nations. We really don't think about that, but this is really interesting to give you an idea of the mass, the size of China. On the north by Korea, northeast, Russia and Mongolia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, and Sikkim. Anybody ever hear of that one? I had to look that one up to be sure that one was. Bhutan and India to the southwest, and Myanmar, Laos, Vietnam to the south. China is the second largest economy in the world, and it's the United States' second largest export destination.
Awesome. And so with that in mind, one of the things that you touched on was the importance of knowing the customs and culture within China, and I'd imagine the same must be true in Africa as well. And so with that in mind, what are some of the dynamics in the labor markets in those respective areas that you all do business? And beyond that, how is that affecting your strategy, your business strategy, as you're in those countries or on the continent? Either one of you can answer that question.
As far as labor markets, it is very diverse. I mean, the history of Africa, it's been settled by multiple different empires. And so laws are extremely different. Senegal, French-based, is completely different than Ghana, which was, English or British. But in general, because of the history and the level that they're developed, all the countries, regardless of where they are on the scale, there's still quite a tremendous protectionism for the the employees. So unlike here in the United States, the businesses have a little bit more of an advantage. Labor costs, the cost to the person is not high. However, the taxes you pay and the benefits you pay, and the benefits can be anything from, health care and whatnot, and paying for funeral costs for one of the immediate family members, to actually a bag of rice. I mean, that's, paying a bag of rice a month. So it's very diverse, but understanding why those laws are there really helps. Our loyalty with our staff, and we have 5 offices across the continent right now. At one point we had, at 8, we were representing Shell Oil and they divested. But the difference is we have such loyalty because we recognize why those laws are in place, and we never really end up fighting them. We understand it. We work within the realm. They seem excessive for the standards in the United States, but we're not in the United States when we're working there. So they are extreme, and it's an issue that should be just handled up front, and then it's really not an issue. It's what we found.
Okay. And then Mike, similar question.
Yes, very important to be introduced well in advance of trying to do business in China to the customs and culture. Asian cultures have a lot in common. Almost all of them have certain things that are common one to another. The family unit is extremely important. The way that families are raised, the respect that they have for elders, for professors, for anybody who is in the education field, very, very much an important part of their culture. They are very hard-working people. Our staff, our operations actually are in Guangzhou on the mainland part of China. These people can't do enough to get the job done. And there's no such thing as going home until the job is done. And that's not because they get pressure from management. They just want that job done. We put our people together in teams. We have engineers teamed up with marketing and salespeople whenever we do business together out with clients, out with end users in the marketplace. They go as teams and they bond, and they really do a terrific job because they back each other up. I think that the important thing to really understand is that China is really a patchwork quilt of many, many different tribes in the end. And you don't see that, but you do see differences in how people appear. People from the north of the country, Inner Mongolia, for example, which is one of the provinces, look drastically different physically from the people who live in the south of the country. They behave differently. But in the end, what I'd like to stress is that China is a long-term play, and relationships count. If you don't have a relationship or you're not interested in developing a relationship with whoever you're going to try to do business with, you're probably wasting your time, because relationships count, not only between members of your staff, but also with customers, particularly with customers. And over time, we found it takes, in some cases, it's taken as long as maybe 6 or 7 years to get the kind of relationship where you can really parlay that into business.
So then in that note, how has your approach, and this is a question that I'll pose to all of you, what is your approach to finding and evaluating partners and to build the relationships that you've just described, Mike, in terms of just building those very strong relationships?
There are lots of ways to go about finding partners and making sure that you have good partners. When one thinks about going into China, the first thing I would think about would be to utilize the services offered by the U.S. Commerce Department. They have a program called Gold Key, and I'm sure Bill will talk about that, or will be perhaps addressed by others in this day today. There's also another way to help identify prospective partners in China would be to take advantage of the resources that your state has available. And Jessica represents one very large cluster of resources that you can turn to if you're a state of Maryland company. Virginia has a good program also. So that's the economic development part of it. Many of these organizations have offices overseas. And with respect to China, the state of Maryland has a rock star organization over there, headed by a guy named Xiao Ning. Tremendously successful, helping Maryland companies do all kinds of things in China. So that's a go-to place for sure. Commerce and also state of Maryland, in the case of Maryland itself.
Okay. So Bill and Jessica, would you like to add to that in terms of evaluating and finding business partners?
Sure. So the state of Maryland, as Mike mentioned, we actually have now 11 foreign offices overseas. And one of the purposes of those offices is to assist our Maryland companies that are looking to export. Quite frequently, the types of services that we do have requested from our companies are to assist with identifying partners or potential distributors, things of that nature. And I think one of the advantages that going through these offices offers is that you get a little bit more of a personal introduction than just sort of a cold call. And I know I cover India and Africa, and in both of those markets, that really makes a huge difference. And both of the reps that I work with do wonderfully in that, and I know also our China office does as well. We can also assist with things like even some vetting or background checks. The commercial service does some of that as well. And I know that some of our companies have taken advantage of that service and been pleased. And that can be helpful also if you're not on the ground and you're looking for that partner. Other things that I find are helpful is that companies should always, even if you are taking advantage of services such as those at the state of Maryland or the Department of Commerce, do a little of your own sleuthing as well. Googling a company or a potential partner can be helpful. You never know what you might find. And I would always suggest doing that as an extra backup. Not only the company, but perhaps also the principals. Given some of the markets that I've worked in, you just don't know who might be contacting you. So it's good to do that as well. And something else that can be helpful when you're working with a partner, before you get too far into that process, if you have IP that you need to protect, intellectual property, look into that in advance as well. So a few things I'd recommend, but our offices can certainly be helpful if you are looking to expand overseas.
Bill?
I would just like to add as well, working with the state of Maryland is a fantastic opportunity for all the companies. We work with the state very closely, and so outside of the markets that they're in, I think you said 11. We operate in a broader footprint, so we're in about 70 countries. So when we can refer clients to the state of Maryland, we like to do that because their programs are so great. And when we're outside that footprint, our resources are very similar in the services we can provide, but definitely broader in terms of markets. So a few points I'd like to make about finding partners. We do have a service called a Gold Key, which is very reasonable for a small and mid-sized company, $700. Can help you to identify a potential partner to work with. In fact, we'll take a set of information from you about your business objectives, what kind of partner you're looking for, and feed back to you a list of 4 to 6 qualified companies that meet the criteria, so you can then select from that list. We also offer a background checking service called an International Company Profile. There are great ways for you to check your partners yourself. As Jessica mentioned, Googling the map, look for their address. Does the address make sense for the type of company you're talking about? How recent was their website created? If it's within the last year, particularly in some markets, it's probably not a legitimate website that corresponds to a company that is suggesting they've been in business for 5 or 10 years. So there's tips like that. We have a team of people here in Maryland. We also have several, about 1,200 folks spread across the world in all these different markets who are available to talk to you and email exchange on any given topic and help counsel you through your decision-making process about which market is the right market, which partner is the right partner, how do we best approach this. So there's plenty of resources around the room, around the state, who can help you with this problem.
Awesome. And one thing that I'd like to just double back to also is because Jessica, you mentioned IP, and so the whole notion of intellectual property and the challenges around sort of protecting intellectual property. So I'd like to ask Mike sort of what your observations have been on IP challenges specifically in China, and then how have you approached those challenges?
Oh, I knew that question was coming. China. Everybody thinks about, oh, my intellectual property. Why would I want to go do business in China? They're going to steal it. IP challenges have not receded in China. Depending on your product, they may be substantial on one end of the scale, and maybe on the other end, not very significant at all. Obviously, the higher technology your product is, the more you perhaps are at risk of having something taken and used unlawfully. Patent protection can be helpful. However, patents divulge critically important information about your products and your processes and so forth. So there's something to think there, kind of a counterbalance on that one. Reverse engineering is a possibility still. The Chinese, I want to say this, mentality with these has always been that if they can copy something, it's theirs. That is in the culture. It's been very difficult to turn the tide to get companies, people within companies, to respect intellectual property and intellectual property rights. Software is always at center stage, but software can be a frontline defense, and I'd be happy to later on perhaps to expand on that. We have one company we work for in China. They're in the business of processing glass for automotive applications, and they've come up with a very clever way of controlling what goes on with their software in China. And finally, on the plus side, the Chinese government has made good progress toward IP protection, making it essentially a federal offense if you're found guilty of IP theft. But they're not really there yet. There's still violations going on out there.
Okay. And so how have you personally encountered any challenges around that, and how have you addressed them?
Yeah, remarkably no. And this is, I'm not sure why that is, and I'm always asked that question when a company comes to us and said, okay, we want you to work for us in China, what about our IP? Of course, I can't guarantee no IP intrusions or theft. All I can say is that we have a lot of experience with Chinese companies. We know typically how they operate. We know how they operate in those areas that could lead you to problems with IP. Fortunately, with the companies we work for, and we do technology too, products, we're in the meteorological instrument business, for example, we've never had a single violation, but there's always a first time.
Hopefully not. Bill?
Yes, if I could add a point to that. With regard to IP rights, we have, Department of Commerce creates market research for all these different markets that we're in. And in that market research, which is free to get through export.gov, there are sections about the potential IP risks for those different markets. And this can come anywhere from product registration processes in those countries to formal intellectual property protection by submitting your patents, or even in the form of standards with regard to testing your product to make sure they're in compliance with local rules and regulations, where you might have to disclose more than you're comfortable disclosing to a local testing party. So there are quite a few different ways where these risks can come into the process. And as Nancy mentioned earlier, understanding the local processes and the customs and the business flow is very important to determine where your risks are for each and every different market. China is uniquely challenging. Brazil is challenging. There's lots of challenges. So understanding the specific market you're going into, what it looks like, what's the normal process, and also talking to people who have done this before can help you to identify where you might face some risk given what it is that you make or sell. And again, I think where the folks on the ground who have people on the ground, everyone on this panel, the state of Maryland, Department of Commerce, there's also we have formal intellectual property counselors in different regions of the world who just focus on those challenges for those regions through our offices. So there's lots of different ways where you can get hit by this without thinking that you're actually at risk.
As a small business owner, where will your next customer come from? Think outside the box by looking beyond the U.S. borders. Nearly 96% of consumers live outside the U.S. 2/3 of the world's purchasing power is in foreign countries. Go where the customers are. There is a significant opportunity for small businesses to increase sales through exporting.
And that's why, for the first time, the United States of America is launching a single, comprehensive strategy to promote American exports. It's called the National Export Initiative. And it's an ambitious effort to marshal the full resources of the United States government behind American businesses that sell their goods and services abroad.
Here are just a few advantages of exporting. Increased sales and profit. U.S. competitive edge for high-quality, innovative goods and services. Increased purchasing power resulting from declining exchange rates. Reduction in trade barriers. Now's the time to consider exporting or moving into additional foreign markets. And you don't have to go it alone.
where did I turn to? I went back to the SBA, and there was a document on how to export, and we started learning about the process of exporting. We started advertising, and at the time there was the Department of Commerce would put out these publications that would be at all the embassies across the world. You'd pay a little bit of money, you'd get a picture of your product and a little quote in there about what it is and who to write to about more information. We were flooded with inquiries.
The U.S. Small Business Administration provides counseling, training, and financing programs to help you start, grow, and succeed in exporting. Other U.S. government agencies will help you identify business opportunities and market your products or services overseas. Trade professionals working directly with small businesses have expertise across every major industry sector and every key global market. Customized business solutions maximize the return on trade investment. The government also provides credit insurance on foreign accounts receivables, financing of a U.S. company's foreign market development cost, and transactional working capital. For more information on how SBA and our government partners can help you take your business global, go to www.sba.gov or www.export.gov or call 1-800-USA-TRADE.
Questions. If anyone has a question, you can feel free to come to the center mic and just ask your question of the panelists. So let's move on. What about, because one of the things that you mentioned is you mentioned the website, you mentioned Gold Key. What's the best way for us to find out about sort of current market conditions in a particular demographic, or perhaps we're looking to expand our respective businesses? Outside of Googling and things of that nature, what would you say, I guess Mike or Nancy, what were the one or two key resources that you were able to use in order to identify the current market conditions and which markets that you should grow your business into?
I would say we always get as much information as we possibly can, and part of getting information, we rely heavily on the Department of Commerce. We rely heavily on the embassies in the country. That's one form of information, but you really can't discredit Google. I'm sorry, especially in Africa. There are tremendous organizations out there. There's a Chamber of Commerce. There's a Corporate Council in Africa, which is very knowledgeable. They all have their different slant of information. And if you have it from all perspectives, including there's probably 2,500 newspapers that are online newspapers in Africa. You start to see some of those. You see who are the key businessmen, women in those countries, who are being talked about. And then you'll start to see who pops up at some of the scheduled events, and there's always events in all the countries. Go to the embassies, the African embassies here in Washington, D.C. So the internet is actually a tremendous resource, particularly in low infrastructure areas that I know people are very hesitant to go online or to get on a plane and go to Africa, to some of these countries that have high opportunity and a little bit of higher risk. So you can really temper any mistakes or possibly wrong directions by getting as much information you can and then vetting it, taking specific questions to the state offices and the Department of Commerce, and they'll tell you, oh, we have heard of them, or we haven't heard of them, or no, they've not popped up on any of our events. Well, if someone reached out to you and they've never gone to any of the other events that's been held by the U.S. government or by a state office, chances are they're not a big player. And so when you're looking at partnerships, you look at who, they're investing in you and you're investing in them. So are you going to invest in someone that no one's really heard of? So I would say Google is actually, we rely heavily on the internet. and then just talking to people and building our own network.
Gotcha. Okay. Mike?
Don't overlook trade associations, industry trade associations. They can be very, very helpful with information to everybody who is a member of that association. I'm not talking just domestic, internationally too, especially international, depending on your product or your service. I would also make a pitch here for companies that are in the sales representation business, who work in the markets where you would like to go. If you can find a company where there's a good fit and you've done your due diligence, you've done the vetting, as Nancy indicated, those sales representation companies have a very good grasp of what goes on in markets, and they can tell you up front whether there's specifically something worth going for or not. They can discourage you if they see that perhaps they're not equipped or experienced at doing it, or if they see that you're just not willing to make the commitment. It's a big commitment because it requires travel to the country, certainly at some point. And speaking of travel, traveling to China and participating in an exhibition or a trade show is very, very important. That's how we got started many, many years ago, just getting out there and getting the lay of the land.
I would like to add one more thing. Even Forbes, everyone follows Forbes, and you find out what the companies are doing business. You know, they have Forbes top technology companies in Africa. They have Forbes has a top women's African businesses. So even US, and CNN just did another top 10 technology companies in Africa. So even US outlets, so you do your typical research on anybody you're going to do business with. What happened?
Yeah, I would just echo what both Mike and Nancy have said. We at the state of Maryland, when we are looking for qualified groups, buyer groups to come in and buy products from our Maryland companies, we look to trade associations, business associations in those markets where we work. So for example, the state of Maryland has memorandums of understanding in place with some major business associations based in India and elsewhere around the world to develop that relationship, because relationships are so important. Speaking of relationship building, eventually you will need to do face-to-face relationship building to really move forward in many markets around the world, especially I've experienced in emerging markets. To that effect, the state of Maryland does have a resource for our companies. We have a grant program called Export MD, which provides up to $5,000 of reimbursement towards perhaps your first exhibition in a foreign market, or your first trip to go meet a potential client, or if you're expanding in a market where you already are located. So that's something else to keep in mind. And that's paired with our foreign office services, which of course can assist with perhaps even identifying the trade association that would be most relevant for your business. And also paired with, of course, the services that our friends at Department of Commerce offer.
Yeah, I think we're very fortunate in this region, the Maryland, DC, Virginia region. This is an amazingly diverse and international region, starting with schools and religious organizations locally, all the way up to businesses and government, and there's probably no higher concentration of embassies than right downtown. So if you can't find information about a given market here, you might want to rethink your strategy, because really look at your neighbor. Chances are they especially in Montgomery County, are probably from a different country. Amazingly diverse population here in Maryland, all the way up through formal processes, through these agencies and government resources. From a macro perspective about markets, the World Bank has amazing information and data available that's easily understandable through their analysis. The CIA, Factbook, all these groups are in the business of analyzing all these places, and so and it's all free and there to get. And also, all of us here are able to assist to make sense of that information with you as well. So we hold regular networking events with foreign embassies that are in the region. So we're frequently convening networking events with given countries. Their economic team from the embassies are there, so you can ask questions about their perspective on their markets versus our perspective on their markets. There's a ton of opportunities any given day to mix and mingle and meet these people who can help you get into the markets.
Bill, I think you should mention Export Tech too.
Oh, sure.
What do you think?
Yeah, we have a program that actually all of us are involved in. It's called Export Tech. This is a process where we take a group of executives, about 10 companies at a time, through an international business planning and development process. So the idea is to help a company who perhaps is engaged in international business but doesn't have a clear strategy yet, to really focus on their strategy, get their product differentiation in place, understand their intellectual property risks, and develop a go-to-market plan for perhaps the next 6 to 18 months. And we do this in a compressed cycle of a 3-month period. And the end result is that after those 3 months, you have a very clear action plan. You've identified your immediate risks for the markets that you've chosen to go into. You've been introduced to a team of resources locally and internationally who can help you accomplish that plan. And we've hopefully taken a lot of the questions out of your next foray into international. So we hold that program annually, and happy to share the information with the audience after the meeting. We pull on public sector, private sector. Mike and Nancy are both active participants when they're in the country in advising the companies. Jessica is there all 3 sessions. And so all these things that we're discussing as a panel sort of come to a focus point in this Export Tech program. And we also take companies individually through a similar process, but this is a very condensed and focused way. And you get to meet 8 or 10 other executives who are going through the same thing, and there's an awful lot of learning that takes place between your peers in that group setting. Thanks for reminding me about that.
Awesome program.
It's a great program.
Graduate of our 2014 program in our audience today.
At least 2.
At least
Yes,
2.
you.
And perhaps you, later on during networking time, you can get to meet them and talk to them about the program.
Absolutely, awesome. And I know we have a couple of questions. If you could just come and take the mic, that would be great.
So, information as well as question. My name is Tababu Asafa. I'm originally from Ethiopia. I see a big disconnect. There is a emerging U.S. African diaspora business community with experience, interest, motivation to get involved. But we're disconnected with you because we can minimize your risk by being directly present for you to do all the basic necessary work, even to go. In fact, because of that, we just formed an organization called U.S. African Diaspora Business Council to link the motivated, vibrant Africans who are here, who know the both markets, who have connection and experience to be available for businesses who would like to venture in the emerging markets of Africa. So it's an information, but the question is, how do we make our expertise, our human resource, our motivation available to you? Thank you.
I think I'll take that. Actually, I think that I was not aware of that, and I think the probably the most effective way to reach multiple companies like Computer Frontiers would be through these 2 people, because we go to them on a regular basis and say, what other companies are we're expanding here, we're doing this project, you know anybody, are there any groups we should reach out to? And I think that goes to what Mike was saying, the trade associations, even though you're not a trade association, those connections, meeting for your group to meet the most number of companies, they know what companies in Maryland want to do business in Africa. And so for me to understand or know what company or what organizations we should be talking to, I would ask them first.
We have on May 22nd, there will be an event near BWI, which is the 2nd annual Maryland Celebration of International Trade event. And it's a designed as really awareness building and heavy content information provided to participants at a very, very low cost. So the registration fee is $99 for a whole day. And there's actually opportunities for companies to exhibit at a table to the participants. But there'll be 3 different tracks going all day long on either how to enter new markets if you're already in international markets, how to expand, and how to deal with case studies that case study track that seasoned international business folks will be responding to different challenges. So this event on May 22nd, last year we had over 300 participants. This year we're hoping to grow, and that's an excellent opportunity coming up in the next few weeks to broaden your exposure of your group and meet more people.
And I would say on both sides. So as you go back to Ethiopia, which I'm sure you do multiple times a year, have you been in touch with the Department of Commerce and their commercial officer in Ethiopia. Because I know with the offices we have on the ground, one of our partner in Senegal is one of the officers for the American Chamber of Commerce. Our partner in Uganda was always known. I mean, every embassy event, Computer Frontiers was a part of it. So you work it from both sides. And there's such a tremendous link. And I'd say that for the state of Maryland offices also, tremendous linkages there, both in country and back in the U.S.
And we are always looking for more ways to reach out to our local community. I know Africa in particular is an area I've been focusing on, and I've been looking for more ways to work with our diaspora community and bring more ideas into how we can address some of the issues for those communities that are looking to expand into international markets as well. So
Awesome.
thank you for the question.
Hi, this question is for Nancy and Mike. What was your first step into the global market?
Personally or company-wise?
Both.
Do you want to go first?
Go. The company I was working for shipped me overseas on a 3 to 5 year assignment to Europe when I was a bachelor. I came back 12 years later with a Dutch wife, a son born in Holland, and a daughter born in England. That was how I got into international the first time. Once it's in your bloodstream, it never goes away. And of course, China, Asia came after that. Company eventually persuaded me to come back, and when I got back, they said, okay, you're still responsible for European operations. Now you're going to go to China. We need to do business in China. So that's how I got to China, too.
Mine was Peace Corps. And through Peace Corps, being a volunteer, and actually the philosophy of Computer Frontiers is real impact in any culture or any community is working on the ground with people. And so we believe that employing people and hiring people is the best way to help a country develop. So.
Question?
Thank you for all the expertise in this panel, and I'm Daniel Parra, Executive Director of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Montgomery County. So I'm very interested, of course, in asking about how is the other side of the mirror for Hispanics, especially Africa and China, and the way that the state and the Department of Commerce are making connections within Hispanics in those markets.
Was the question, well, with regard to Latin America, the Department of Commerce has a very big initiative now. It's called Look South Initiative. And one of the key lead-off programs for that is actually a trade mission that I'm involved in that's going to 5 markets, Colombia, Panama, Peru, Ecuador, and Chile. And that will take place in a few weeks, in May 15th. So that's a national trade mission. Probably about 100 companies will be going. It's the largest mission to Colombia from the government ever. So we're investing heavily. It's from the Western Hemisphere perspective, tremendous markets, free trade agreements in very important markets, and great growth opportunity across the whole South America, Latin America perspective. So we're strong from the Department of Commerce on building bridges and getting deals done. I forget the second part of your question, but
Well, more like how it looks in Africa and China, the
Oh, I
Hispanic
see.
growth.
In Africa,
Coming is not happening.
yeah, it's very limited in Africa, except for in the Portuguese-speaking countries. I mean, there is Brazilians living in those countries and doing some trade and setting up companies, but if it's a language barrier or if it's just unfamiliarity with Africa in general, it is very limited, though.
It's a good question. From my perspective, I haven't seen any activity in China, and I don't know why. I mean, that is a really good question.
I think an interesting corollary is the Chinese activity in Latin America is a different question. But even more interesting from the perspective of the competition that you will face in those markets is most likely from Chinese companies when you're going after your business.
Actually, globally, it's the biggest
Yeah.
competitor in Africa is
Africa, too.
Chinese.
Yeah.
Question?
Hi, my name is Tina Enwizi. I'm originally from Nigeria. My question is actually to you, Nancy. You mentioned Uganda, South Africa, Ghana, Liberia as the best place to do business in Africa. Have you tried Nigeria?
Yes,
which, in my
do,
opinion,
yes.
is the biggest market, should be the biggest market.
And I do
in West
apologize.
Africa.
We do, and actually, we've done quite a bit of work in Nigeria. It was with the partners. We are still pursuing activities, and we still have work and we have people in Nigeria. It's a great marketplace. It's one of the higher developed, more developed countries.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's for our market and what we do in our business model has not been adapted as quickly as in the other countries. Okay. So for a host of factors, but you're absolutely right. It's a great place to do business, and we do business there.
I'll note that the state of Maryland, when we opened our office in Africa, we opened it in Nigeria, recognizing both the growth in that country as well as the fact that we have a huge diaspora population actually here in the state of Maryland. And there is therefore a lot of interest in doing business there. So that has been a focus country for us in the state.
Well, this brings us to the close of this panel. Certainly, if you have more questions, I would just advise you to just reconnect with the panelists during the break or at the lunch break. This has been a lively discussion. I definitely want to thank you, Nancy, Mike, Jessica, and Bill, for your contributions. This has been great. I've been feverishly taking notes, as I'm sure a lot of folks have been. But this does conclude this panel on international business development. Thank you so much.